Um, Good morning. Thank you very much for attending. My name is Nairu Tijani. I'm from the Department of Social Work at Florida Gulf Coast University, and this is Dr. Thomas Felke. We are briefly going to talk about one of the electives that we developed at the school on human trafficking. And I have personally constantly strived in using audiovisual as visuals as a medium of learning when it comes to teaching social work. Dr. Felke has done a lot more work with technology and how to incorporate different types of technology in social work education. So today, I wanted to focus on human trafficking at first, as we are here for the hot topic discussion. Well, it is a hot topic. In every which way, it's hot. It's human trafficking to begin with. Why is it hot? Because there are 2.4 million people who are enslaved at a given day. Now, are these estimates accurate? I don't know. I don't think so. But these are estimates, and that tells us that even if it's half of it, the numbers aren't anywhere close to where they should be. Disciplines right now that focus on the issue in the classrooms are like criminology, political science, sociology. To some extent, cultural anthropology has picked up in the last 3 years, I should say. Since 2009, I've had a few, that I have reviewed. Very few people in social work have done any research on human trafficking. There's a lot written about it. Majority of it is criticism based on policy analysis, which is very easy to do, because, okay, well, I'm not giving the reason before I move on. So the reason why I got interested in this was, because my journey was something like this. I hail from India, and there were some girls who were trafficked from India. They were involved in the sex industry to some extent there, but the government came up with a new policy that banned bar dancing. And these were girls who were hardly literate, so girls with very little education, no knowledge of any other language but whatever they were born with. And the only other option, and in conservative societies, where would the girls go? So when they tried going back home, they were honor killings. They were abandoned. So long as they were sending money home, everything was fine. When the girl comes back home, excuse me, you're not my daughter. Excuse me, you're not my wife anymore. So they were approached by traffickers, and some of them, I did majority of my work then in this Metroplex, Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex, on 45 women who were trafficked to the United States. The destination was not here, but so that's where my journey began. So I think the only people who are currently working on this subject is we're literally premature when it comes to this issue. Are people who in one or the other way got involved in the movement by chance, by interest, by personal experience. Like I said, there's lack of research. Why is there a lack of research? I'll tell you my story again. Okay, I know probably you don't want to hear it, but I'll still tell you because it's important. It's a catch-22 because every time I want to do a study on human trafficking, particularly sex trafficking or domestic trafficking, the only way to get true data is going to be when you talk to the victims. And we abide by confidentiality, anonymity, and IRB. So where do you go? So it's one of those areas. It's like cloning. It's a research that you want to do. There are advantages to it. Some people see it. Some people see more harms in it. So one of the reasons how we can justify that we are not going to incorporate this in social work. Well, not my favorite reason to do that, but easiest to ignore but difficult to pursue. Okay, is it impossible to do it? If it was impossible, why are other disciplines doing it? Okay, how are they doing it? There are methods out there. So how did I do that? I used ethnography. I mean, it's not easy. I used autoethnography. So I had to dig in other areas in order to come up with a methodology that would fit what I wanted to do. And we are still pretty conservative. This whole medicine mode, of social work is kind of a rush, I feel, and creativity gets lost. So it's harder to study the subject. One of the things that I learned, and in my journey of education, was that more and more of my colleagues in the classrooms were visual learners. You learned better. There was a rather better impact of those visuals than the reading material. Now, I'm not saying that reading is unimportant, but it's not long lasting. It doesn't hit you for a long time. So I'm not talking news items, but I'm talking something. So the trouble, again, that I ran into was that journalism does not require IRB, as we did. So sometimes you have those flashy news items that are where the research base is so limited, and that's what you see all over the media. People believe that stuff. So why do we need to bring it here? It's time that social workers woke up and said, well, maybe we need to be doing this, because at least we dirty our hands. We go down, we dig the depth. So why not do it ourselves? Maybe we are not best at it, but then join hands, shake hands, that's the way to go. So I've produced 2 documentaries so far. One is Shadows of Sex Trafficking. It's an audio documentary. This film was produced with students. So I, with my students in a human trafficking and macro practice elective, they got together and we came up with a film. We staged things. We did qualitative interviews way ahead. So, and the film is out there. It's been screened at different film festivals and universities. So yeah, that's one example. The second one I made was a personal journey. I just wanted to share, and that's something that I keep sharing. And I think the response has been phenomenal. Students are excited about it, and I think that they learned. There are more and more since I joined Florida Gulf Coast University in 2009. The first elective that I taught on human trafficking after developing it, to now I have to literally turn students down, whether or not I like it, because more and more, there's more interest for sure. So why not social work? Evidence base is an issue, so we need to think of ways in which we create research on this topic. Lack of knowledge, do we have textbooks? That's one more struggle that I run into. We don't. Well, I'm quite happy with not having a textbook in a way, because then, I could pick from different sources, and that's what I do in the course. But it would be nice to have one, because particularly if it's BSWs, I don't want to read novels, and I don't want to read really intense research. I want to read something that's to the point, which I learned the hard way. That's what we learn the best with. And I struggle with that type of teaching, but I think that's what they need. That's what they learn best with. It's a relatively new area of research, so we need to encourage our students to start thinking about it. Need ignorance about it. Recruitment of victims using technology. Okay, and there are 3 websites that. I'm not talking Craigslist, that's now monitored, but there are 3 more websites in Florida alone that are primarily geared towards recruiting victims. Okay, do we have? Could you do anything about things like this? Okay, there are not-for-profit agencies that have realized it now. Law enforcement is nowhere close to where they should be about doing stuff like that. I'll give you an example of a victim. This happened last year. They recruit from Facebook, for example. This is a Facebook one. In Florida, there's a girl who was invited for a party and not told, what it is and so on, by an old friend, old high school friend. Ended up going there, and basically she was asked to do things, and she refused. She was gang raped, and right now, after that happened, she was closed for a few months, and then Catholic Charities took the case, and they were basically interrogating the girl with the law enforcement, and what they found was that on a constant basis, younger kids, like younger teenager kind of kids, have been involved in recruiting through social networking websites, and not the three that I'm talking about that use international, that are primarily geared towards international victims. But so we are not there yet, okay? So that's one more reason why we should think about using technology more positively than letting them get ahead. Multidisciplinary approach. I'm a firm believer in this because I know one thing, that nobody can achieve anything in isolation, period. At least I can't. So every time when you join hands, you learn something new. And this is a subject that has so many angles to it. There's a criminology side of it, sociology obviously, social work. We still put victims with domestic violence shelters, homeless shelters. They're thrown out, they have smoking problem, they're alcoholics, we're not gonna take them, same old stories. Political science. Do you know what the policy says on human trafficking right now? What's the policy? Unless a victim complies with the law enforcement in finding the bad guys, they cannot be given T visa, which essentially means, we changed it in Florida fairly recently, last year, to be precise. But, and the same thing, when I was doing my dissertation, the 45 girls that we had enough data from, that they've been trafficked, we could do nothing about it. I mean, they were left on their own in a foreign country on the hands of traffickers. Why? Because the policy says, unless you're going to tell me there's a guy putting a gun on your head, your life is at risk, and you're going to help me find his buddies, we're not going to help you.
In Missouri, because unfortunately Kansas City and St. Louis trade off between the third and the fourth largest areas for human trafficking in the
labor
United
trafficking
States.
in particular.
The Flares Project, and I work with them very closely, and I worked with them directly before. We passed laws in Missouri that now
we do too. We have them in Florida now.
When women are picked up for prostitution in any office street or a hotel, anywhere, we have an assessment now. They're not just immediately arrested and put in jail for.
Awesome.
We assess them. For,
so are these domestic only, or?
I'm sorry. No, all.
Okay.
Women and men and boys. I mean, anybody who is arrested for prostitution in Missouri now. Now, is everybody doing that?
It's a different story. It's a different story. But at least there's a law, which is a progress.
It's
awesome.
a component of that. So
in Florida now, it's so much. It depends so much on the attorney's office and how active they are. Like, we have it now. We started in 2009 with the reauthorization, when there was that new clause where at least there was that loophole to play with.
Right.
Last year, last year was the first time the U.S. Attorney's Office actually made progress in Florida. So it's happening. I mean, I don't know about Texas, I'm not keeping up, but I'm pretty sure it's happening everywhere slowly. We are getting there, but again, labor trafficking, we're still there, pretty much there. But it's easier on the other hand. I mean, it's easier to say that my employer is, exploiting me than saying that I'm sexually exploited. It's a different story altogether. But yeah, thank you for that. So yeah, multidisciplinary approach always helps, and my so far I'm very, very weak at technology. Okay, I grew up in the dark ages in India, sometimes I feel, and never learned it. So that's why partnering really helps. Like, if Dr. Felke was not there, it would be hard for me. So likewise, I think if we partner, it helps. Need for social workers to serve victims of human trafficking. Practice models. I talk with micro practitioners on a regular basis. People talk about it. Are there specific models? Like, we have scales on domestic violence. We have scales on partner violence, which we use for trafficking. But this is historic. This is the closest I can get is historic trauma scale, because it's a generational trauma scale. I mean, that's somewhere where you could compare the level of trauma, because it's over and over and over again, but we are not ready for it. Benefits for audiovisual tools of learning. Well, I see several. To begin with, I think it creates interest, and more as we are moving towards online technology that Dr. Fatki will talk more about, I think that instead of giving only reading material, if you approach teaching in different ways, I think you get better results. The problem, though, with that is that sometimes you do not have the level, the level of depth in the audiovisual material that you would want, and I think that's a problem. That's a struggle that we can overcome, if we become, receptive to this technology. And I think it's got larger reach. It's much easier to just send videos and tell people, okay, use it for your classrooms, than trying to do Skyping even, or some of the other technologies that you could use. Importance. It highlights a successful teaching strategy implemented to foster awareness and potential advocacy among our students regarding the issue of human trafficking. I think there is no course that I teach in the program where I do not talk about human trafficking. Now, I tailor it to the needs of the course. If it's research, I talk about research part of it. If it's policy, I talk about policy part of it. But I incorporate it because it's important. And in Florida, we get the Polaris office gets the second highest calls from Florida. Okay, and minors I'm not even talking over 18, so.
Good morning, everyone. Dr. Johnny is really the expert in human trafficking. I have more of an interest in international. And when I arrived at FGCU 3 years ago, I was very pleased to start working with Dr. Johnny around this project, largely because I realized not only the importance of the work that she was doing, but also the methodology that we could potentially employ for the students. During my MSW program, I had the opportunity to travel to Armenia to do work with ethnic Armenian refugees from Azerbaijan and Nagorno-Karabakh, and during that process, I very unwittingly ended up developing a mini documentary about that situation, and it was really only because I had a camera with me to kind of document the trip. When we got back to Connecticut and we began to view the footage, we realized that we actually had captured a lot about the situation. So we ended up putting that together under the direction of Dr. Lynn Healy, which was a great help to us in doing that, and putting together that documentary. And it was successful to the point that we actually returned to Armenia 3 years later. We did a second documentary about the development of social work in Armenia. And from that, I eventually went back and did my dissertation on that same situation in Armenia as well. So upon arriving at FGCU and meeting with Dr. Johnny and having that opportunity, we began to look at ways where the students could be a little bit more creative and opening them up to how they could really get involved with this. So as Dr. Johnny said, we began to look at some of the core competencies to see what connections and tie-ins might be there. Of course, this is an elective course, so we don't necessarily have to tie it back to the core competencies, but it seems like that's probably a really good idea these days. Yeah, and it was a good fit. Right. So, obviously we're talking about research-informed practice and practice-informed research on one level. And as Dr. Johnny said, the importance of that really came from the fact that there wasn't a lot. So to be able to get our students engaged and have them go out, particularly given the fact of Florida's status with human trafficking, this really becomes a local issue for our students. The majority of our students are primarily going to stay in that Florida area. So for them to have that knowledge, go out and get engaged was really important. There is a task force in Lee County, which is where FGCU is located, around human trafficking, so that was important. And FGCU is actually on the verge of putting into plans the development for a informational center on human trafficking that will be, so a resource center that'll be operated directly out of the university, primarily by the Department of Social Work. So, we're very happy about that as well. And all of that really is a credit to Dr. Johnny and her work around this. topic, research-based policy practice. And that's kind of where I start to come in a little bit more as I teach the policy courses in our undergraduate and graduate level. So again, trying to look at ways to get students more involved in the policy side of things, because as we know and what the research tells us is that policy is generally that forgotten thing in social work. I routinely have students, particularly at the undergrad level, who don't realize that policy is such a big important part of what we do. So getting them involved in that process and letting them start to realize some of the policies that are out there and the connection that that has with human trafficking is really important. And then the third piece, kind of related to the policy piece, is advocacy. How do we actually get students, once they realize the importance of policy in the profession, to actually get out and be active advocates around different issues? And what we really look at is this type of a course is one way to really get the students thinking about not just the issue of human trafficking, but ways in which they can take the methodologies that they're going to incorporate through this course and do that with other issues that they may be really interested in. You know, we obviously assume that students are taking this elective because they're interested in the topic of human trafficking, but we also understand that there are a lot of students that have other interests besides human trafficking. So how do we get them involved and keep them involved in thinking about ways that they can really stay involved from an advocacy standpoint? So how do we try to integrate it? Largely in the classroom. As Dr. Johnny says, she pretty much talks about human trafficking every chance she gets, and I tend to do the same. I teach research and policy in the Introduction to Social Work course on occasion, and I also developed an Introduction to International Social Work course coming into FGCU to really complement Dr. Johnny's course on human trafficking, to really give students kind of an entree to human rights and so forth, and look at how we pull that together. So we're really trying to make a point of integrating the content across the curriculum. So part of what we do specifically for this elective course is really to start involving students in human trafficking projects. And now when we say involve students, I think we somewhat mislead a little bit here, because it's not that we're involving students, we're really telling the students, go and do something. You know, you figure it out.
Like I taught this hybrid online, face-to-face, and they've done stuff which is just phenomenal.
Yeah, and we'll take a look at some of the examples, and a few of the things are documentaries, websites, music videos, paintings, etc. But we realize that not all students have that creative bone in their body. I even sit there and think I'm one of those people that it's not really my thing either. You know, I'm not going to sit down and paint a work of art, and I'm not going to sit down, I don't play a musical instrument or anything like that. So we really kind of let the students decide, you know, what is it that you want to get involved in? And we've had, as Dr. Johnny said, a lot of really good, really creative examples of how the students have done this. And they do. They run the gamut from basic type of informational research items all the way out to the very creative documentaries, YouTubes, artworks, and we'll take a look at a few of those things as we move on. Again, the foundation for this, as we take a look at it, the topics of human rights, international development, social justice, equal opportunities, these are all things that we try and make sure that we highlight in our coursework, whether it's a research, a policy, an introduction, whatever it is, we're bringing that across. Again, trying to bring in the elective coursework through an international course. We have some travel study work. Dr. Brewster, who's sitting here today with us, is going to be leading, and I'm very fortunate to be joining her, a group of students to Ghana this summer. So we're really trying to develop that sensibility in our students who largely have never really traveled that extensively. So it's nice to be able to offer that opportunity to the students. Format for the course. It's been done a few different ways. We've had, you know, straight traditional coursework, and then we've had an online kind of / hybrid model. We haven't really done any assessment of which model works best at this point, but that may be something. Yeah, so no real comparative assessment of which one's better or worse, and that's really not something we're overly interested in. Our main interest is getting the students involved and getting them into this. There has been some incorporation of service learning, so students actually going out and getting some actual practice with organizations that focus on human trafficking. As Dr. Johnny had discussed in her own work, we do extensive use of audiovisual documentaries. So Dr. Johnny had mentioned the two that she has developed, and we'll actually screen one of those toward the end of this presentation. They use others as well, such as Nefarious and Tampa Bay, and those types of things. So students...
18 documentaries in 15 sessions.
Right. So students really are exposed.
The only thing I think that we don't have stuff on right now is research part of it. Everything else is covered through documentaries. So the whole course can literally be run parallel with the reading material and documentary.
And then again, what we're really then trying to look at is how can we connect it with the liberal arts, and we think we've done a pretty good job with that by really allowing the students to look at a variety of methods for kind of advocating and putting something together that allows them to show their understanding and their points of advocacy on this issue. So we'll primarily talk about the online piece because it's a little bit easier to tie together. As Dr. Johnny said, we have 18 documentaries over 15 sessions. A lot of times, because we're able to stream that information, we can get it all online. We've recently moved to a new LMS format called Canvas, and I don't know how familiar people may be with the Canvas LMS. Canvas is built off of a social media model. So when you look at the Canvas LMS, it's very much built like a wiki page type of a format, but it's highly integrated with a lot of third-party applications such as Facebook, Google. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of really great integration. Yeah, and right now we're a little bit more toward that hate thing because we're only in our first year of converting over to this LMS. So we're still learning, but on the love side, you have to love the fact that we do have all these highly integrated third-party applications that we can bring in.
They could post video assignments, for example.
Right.
So there's some excellent features.
Yeah, and that was part of the problem in the past, and hence our move more toward an online hybrid format, is that by doing it that way, this LMS really does allow for the upload of practically any kind of content that a student can come up with. And then the students can actually view each other's things without having to completely leave the LMS, go into a third-party site, sign up for an account, and do those types of things. It's completely integrated directly within the LMS. And then in addition to the documentaries, we're using a somewhat traditional format in the online sense. We're doing asynchronous reflections where students are going in, they're viewing the documentaries. There's some discussion questions posted via a board, and the students go in and they post their reflections about the documentaries using those guided questions. Students are able to respond to one another, so they can really start to build a dialogue. And what we think happens is that also begins to foster some of those creative energies around how students might then start to think about how they're going to put this together. So we think it kind of serves a dual purpose. As we said, we have a number of documentaries available on the topic. We try to bring in information about assessment, need identification, research, as Dr. Johnny said, specific cases, policy, and always trying to bring that back to the international level. As much as we try and focus domestically and make sure that students are aware that this is a domestic issue, we always try and put it in light of the international context. And then how do we really bridge the gap? As we said, what we're really trying to do is involve students in these human trafficking projects. So I've touched a little bit on some of this already. Students view a documentary every week on different aspects of human trafficking, such as demand, supply, the agents involved, and the service. And then we have some students who actually partner with local agencies and do things such as create art projects. And then the students really fill the gap from assessing the needs and bringing awareness to develop practice methods for victims of human trafficking through the work that they do. So let me swing over and show you a few things. This is one example. Now this is a video, but it's actually a video of a student who's doing artwork.
And is this what you're going to show available for us to see, like outside of this, or is it in your system over
You
here?
can give me your card, and I'll make sure that you get access to it. It's all on Canvas, so I need to make sure that you get access to it. So you can see the whole course, all 80 deaf memories, everything. Basically. I think that makes sure.
So we'll take a look at this one.
These are student assignments, so I don't think,
Okay.
that's,
Yeah.
this is just one example.
So, this is what I've done so far. I basically kind of got the basics of the picture down. Human trafficking, slavery. I've got these chains that are dividing up the 4 different areas of my picture. And then I've written invisible chains because that's what the picture, the painting completely is supposed to depict to us. I've sketched out a woman and I've started to paint her a little bit. And she's got somebody over her, who's got more power than her. Basically, violence against women. That's one of the invisible chains. So that's what I started at so far. And I'm just going to paint a little bit so you can see what I'm doing.
I'll move this along. Yeah, and I'll just want to kind of show you how she...
Final picture is a man trying to get over a fence, representing passing over borders illegally. Another thing that leads to people being exploited. All of these things happen in the United States of America. It's not just another world's problem. It's our problem, and we need to do something about it. And
So that's one example of an artwork piece, obviously presented through video, but that's one example of a project our students have done. Another is an actual, oops, get back to that there. So this is actually a website that a student created using a free website tool called Wix. A lot of people may be familiar with Wix, Wix.com. You can sign up and make a free account. So this student actually went in and created a website, again, looking at some different things and putting it together, looking at some different possibilities for what they would like to do. And so this was really more of a planning kind of, a future thoughts about, how they could do some advocacy work. So talking about a benefit concert, holding a workshop, and those types of things. So that's another example. And then we have another video example. And this was actually a video example that a student had put together.
human trafficking and what people say. What do you think human trafficking is?
The process where they bring like the illegal Mexicans or Guatemalans or anybody from third world countries.
My theory of it is they're trafficking people, women, like across the Mexican border, putting them in trucks and all that.
I always thought that human trafficking is when they get either children or whatever, they're forced to do things that no one should ever do. They're forced out of where they live, sort of demeans them and demoralizes them as a human being.
When I think of human trafficking, I think of the abduction of like vulnerable females and stuff like that.
And no, I think human trafficking is when someone forces someone else to have sex with other people without really their option, and they kind of put them into a system that they're not voluntarily asking to be in. But I know if someone like, they like drug them or somehow manipulate them to do something they don't want to do.
So again, just another example of how the students are trying to do this, and these are some of the ones that are a little bit more on the creative side. But even on the opposite end of the spectrum, we have students who create, items just like this. They put together some posters.
Materials are used by coalition task force because we know funding is an issue for most of us. So
Yeah, so the students through this kind of work are actually having the opportunity to participate in the advocacy process. You know, it opens up the creative outlet, and again, we run the gamut. We're not asking students to all do a documentary or write a song or paint a work of art. We're asking them to use basically what their strengths are and then work from that. Yeah, so some of the outcomes that we know and that students have talked to us about, obviously there's a cultivated interest. You know, as I said, we assume that all students come in with some understanding, but we also understand that some students are walking into the classroom because this is the elective that's being offered that semester and they need to get one done. But they end up leaving the course with this cultivated interest because a lot of them, as you heard the first individual who was painting the project, the reason I shot toward the end of that is the fact that she talks specifically about what I had mentioned, that this is not just an other world problem, which is the perspective that a lot of our students come in with, but they realize that it is a domestic issue as well. So that tends to be some of the things that come out of this, is that the students actually do realize, oh, this isn't just an international problem, this isn't something that's just happening somewhere else, and this is something that I can get involved with locally and become an advocate for. The volunteering strength, you know, we see, as Dr. Johnny said, that students get really interested in this and they have all of these grand ideas that we would love to have the opportunity to currently put in place, but unfortunately we don't. Yeah, sometimes we can. Yeah, and with the, hopefully with the formation of the Resource Center and some of the grant development that we plan to do through the Resource Center, we may actually be able to do more of taking what the students are coming up with and actually putting those things into action in terms of benefits and basketball tournaments and so forth.
They are going to the local art shows. Like I set up two events this year where their work is going, you're going to get a booth where they'll go and talk about it. We have an event for 7 days on campus on it's called Human Trafficking Awareness event. This is all student-led. I mean, this is like 3 years of a few faculty, 2-4 years of a few faculty talking about it. You know, so it's good to see.
Mm-hmm. And then obviously the awareness material generation. All of this stuff is out there. You know, a lot of what you're seeing is more recent, but we have archives of other things that students have done. A student 2 years ago actually wrote a song. I mean, lyrics, the music, the whole 9 yards. She put it down on a DVD or CD, so we actually have that, you know, for posterity. So we are really developing and building a lot of this material. And again, as this resource center comes to fruition, a lot of the information that we're going to be able to have, a lot of the material that the students are generating are going to become part of that resource center. So these students are going to have a long-lasting impact on this topic in that area. And at this point, I don't even know if they understand that. You know, and I think that, you know, that's a big part of where we're going with this resource center, is going to be able to tap into that and say, look at the impact you've been able to make long-term around this issue.
Impact of documentaries. They're moving. It leaves an impact for a long time, I think. They say a news headline has a lifespan of 48 hours. Documentaries is much more. My journey began, my journey began with a genocide. I used to live in India. I had no idea what the Western world looked like. So there was a genocide in 2002, and I was trying to fight for the women who were mass raped and represent them, trying to find lawyers as a social worker was very hard. So I was, all of these channels, BBC, Channel 4, several, CNN, interviewed us on the grassroots level, what's going on. And one of the news analysts basically referred my name to the British Council to pursue law when the legal council fell. So 2 of us were selected to go and pursue law in England. So when I went there, in addition to getting my law degree, I got trained on making documentaries with Channel 4. So I think that's, and when I saw the impact, you know, and that was the time when the Afghan war was going on, so Al Jazeera, what I really got exposed to was the world of media. You know, sitting in Channel 4's office in London, you know, they have like this gazillion screens, okay? You pick each channel And the same news is displayed so differently with a different spin. So I was like, what am I believing here? You know? And that's when really my journey started. And that's when I said, well, we need to do this. You know, no matter what I write, what data I collect, who cares? People read this, you know? So I think that's when, and US, I can talk 15 days on the news that they have here. So it's very controlled to say the least. So we have to take this on. So taking social work curriculum outside social work classrooms is an effort. Road ahead, I think I'll have Dr. Felke talk about it, but developing courses on micro and macro practice with a focus on victims of human trafficking, do assessments with victims of human trafficking using different models, CBT, SFT, use whatever. Trauma-informed care for victims of trafficking, understanding the level of trauma is very important. When you talk to practitioners, micro-practitioners, one of the things that you realize is that they're treating it pretty much like trauma, and it's not the same. Like one of the things, I am not a micro person, so pardon me if I'm talking Greek and Latin, I don't understand what I'm talking. But I think one of the things that I've struggled to understand is, so what is that fine line difference between different levels of trauma? And, why don't we have those multiple scales for assessment? If the level of trauma for person A is significantly different for person B, either psychology, I've talked to psychologists, I've talked to clinicians, and that's one thing that we have to come up with at some point so that we can address this population. Solution-focused therapy for victims of human trafficking. I've done a paper on domestic violence and SFT, and to me seems like a good fit, but again, it's very situational. International human trafficking, I think